Hi. So this has turned into 2 lectures already, just talking about the last 50 pages of Against the Day. As I was trying to say in the last lecture, it's very hard to read a book like this simply because it imposes on your life. And that's why reading these complicated books, we often resort to reading textbooks about them. Ulysses is an example, but something like this, getting something that gives you the summary of what's happening in the book. That's almost like just throwing the book out the window, because you cannot read a summary of this book. Just like you really can't, in fairness, read a summary of Ulysses, if you like it or not. You have to actually read the book. So I wanted to go on to continue about one of the things I would make some summary judgments about this novel, and I'll try to read you a couple brief excerpts. I would like to start at the beginning of this book down the line and do it all over again someday, if I live long enough. This book is, on every single page, beautiful narrative technique. It's funny. It has hilarious characters, emotional and complicated characters, 100 of them at least, plus hundreds of walk-ons and walk-offs. It is narratively constantly inventive. And I'll just read a couple passages. It's continually inventing ways of getting into scenes and out of scenes and introducing characters and bringing them into the scenes and bringing them off the scenes. He's constantly finding ways of doing it. His sentences are beautiful. Someday I would like to do a lecture on the sentences in these late books compared to the ones that the academics love, which are these horrible sentences in Gravity's Rainbow. And their sentences are beautiful and sometimes just totally inventive. And almost every paragraph, you're seeing ideas and ways of using prose that you haven't seen before, but you have to focus because they're for readers. They're not super clever. They're not. You don't need to write them down, diagram them. And you're going to have trouble remembering who all these characters are, but each sentence in every scene is amazing. It's too good. I was thinking this morning when I was trying to explain why I have trouble reading it, is it requires a lot of concentration, like any good piece of prose. But you have to keep that concentration going for, again, I stopped reading it for 4 months. I just couldn't focus with the world in such a mess, and you get personal issues in your mind, things are bothering you. Unless you can really devote a couple hours a day to it, and who can do that, you can't appreciate it. And even when you can appreciate it, it's like, I was thinking of two images, two metaphors. One, if you love chocolate, and you had a garage full of the greatest chocolate in the whole world, and all this, just nothing but the best chocolate, everything you love, the perfect chocolate. And you could go down to that garage anytime you wanted and have a piece of that chocolate. And then someone said, well, I want you to spend 2 hours a day going down and having that chocolate. You're going to get a little sick. It takes a lot of, you're going to lose something. Or the most beautiful man or woman who you wanted to make love to, they looked beautiful, they were wonderful lovers, they were the most perfect people in the world, and in lovemaking they were great. And you're 17 and you can go all night, and you have this perfect person with you, and after a few months of this continuous attention, you're going to start going, geez, maybe I'll go get some chocolate. It's very hard to focus on this quality of prose. One other thing I would like to say, and again, I'm not going to talk about the whole book. I'll try to give a very brief summary. What's fascinating to me is just the level of inventiveness in the book. Let me get my glasses, sorry. With these hundreds, you have hundreds of characters coming and going, hundreds of significant characters coming and going. And when you get to the end of the book, which is where I am now, I haven't even finished it yet. When you get to the end of the book, when most writers are basically resolving the situations they've developed for their primary characters, right? Lord Jim comes to the end of his life, or David Copperfield comes to the end of his life and he meets all the characters he met in the course of David Copperfield. You have some of that going on, where you have a lot of these characters and they're coming back into the story, and we're kind of seeing where they're all going and what's happened to them. Even though we're at that point in the last 40 pages of this massive book, Pynchon is still inventing characters and stories, totally new stories, stories you had never expected yet. And I thought what I would just do for a brief minute, or maybe longer than that, is to take you through a few pages from about 1028, which we're coming to the end of another, the Balkan Wars, I think it was. And we have a few pages where we start to have a new story starts to develop. And in 1028, the Inconvenience, this boat, this giant balloon, which goes off on adventures, is hired to go to Southern California. I can't recall, I don't think Southern California is in the book up till then. Pynchon loves Southern California. And we head back to Southern California, where we meet many of the characters who have kind of ended up there, like a lot of people end up in Southern California. And in the course of these, I'm just going to summarize quickly what I read in the bathtub this morning. We cross the Rockies, and we meet several women who are flying on metal wings, who meet the chums, who develop romantic relationships. The chums of chance are the boys and the men who run the Inconvenience and go off on adventures, like in the Boys' Own Adventures series. They meet a number of women. They have names like Heart Ease and Primula, Glee, Blaze, and Viridian. And in about 2 pages, all those women come to life in relationships with these characters. We then land in Southern California. As we fly across, again, the image against the day. I don't want to talk much about this, but the prevailing image is the accumulation of light and energy of this new America, new world. And light becomes a substance and invests everything. And it's used to divide days into work hours, and it's used to take over this planet. And it's an image of capitalism, really, in these pages here. And I don't want to talk about this, but they're flying over the world, and they're seeing all these lights coming on. And they're seeing lights come on in all sorts of ways, whether it's projecting lies on the movie screen or on television, or opening up the world to examination. It's this continuously repeated metaphor of the day, and going against the day and against the reality of that world is fiction. That's the simplest way I could think of it. And so then we go through this amazingly beautiful passage. I'll just read it. It's a throwaway paragraph. You can pick these up anywhere. In 4 pages, we met all these women. Now we're flying across the continent. While crossing the continent, the boys had expressed wonder at how much more infected with light the nighttime terrains passing below them had become, more than anyone could ever remember, as isolated lanterns and skeins of black gaslight had given way to electric street lighting, as if advanced parties of the working day were progressively invading and settling the unarmed hinterlands of night. But now, at last, flying in over Southern California and regarding the incandescence which flooded forth from suburban homes and city plazas, athletic fields, movie theaters, rail yards and depots, factory skylights, aerial beacons, streets and boulevards bearing lines of automobile headlights, in constant crawl beyond any horizon, they felt themselves in uneasy witness to some final conquest, a triumph over night, whose motive none could quite grasp. Now, you don't see these rhythms in the early books. Just the rhythms of the prose reward being read out loud. You need to read this whole book out loud to appreciate it. Sometimes you have to read this passage over a few times because, like many good books and good prose writers, he's teaching you how to read him as he goes along. And so each paragraph requires that sort of attention to understand what's happening in some of the scenes. You don't need a concordance, you just need to read it carefully. So then we land in Southern California, and within moments we get into a scene where we need to bring in a detective, Lou Bass-Knight. And Lou Bass-Knight's hired to go off and find some characters who've been previous in the novel, who have come up with a new invention which releases images from photographs. So, for example, if you give someone a photograph of your sister or something, they can release it so you can see the world around it and you just see that character go off. So it's like a metaphor of movies and moving pictures, only they're being freed from their photographs. Again, there's a fascinating idea on almost every page of this book. And as much as I would like to read more passages, I think I probably have time to read one more. We then go to LA and we end up in Lou Bass Knight's offices. And we start to get more characters. These women that work in the offices, who actually, each one of them is pretty interesting. But just one last more passage, and I will quit this because I can't explain this whole book to you guys. It's really worth reading after you when you have the time, and after you've kind of decided if you really are acclimated to this prose of Pynchon's, which you could learn through Inherent Vice. Equally good book, just shorter. And we suddenly come into LA and we get kind of a detective version. The kind of material reality of these landscapes they just pop off the page with Pynchon. I just want to give this one last brief passage because these three office girls suddenly become characters. Lou's offices in LA were in one of those swank new buildings going up along Broadway, with elevators and electricity throughout, looking into a vast interior court below a domed skylight which admitted blues and golds somehow more intense than the desert-bleached ones you usually saw around town. The outer suite was verdant with dwarf palms and Diefenbachia, and there were 3 layers of security to be got past, each featuring a deceptively sylph-like receptionist. These girls also worked at the movie studios up in Hollywood as stunt performers whenever a scene, in the wisdom of those ensuring a picture, might endanger a star actress obliged, say, to dangle from a skyscraper ledge or drive a roadster back and forth across a railroad track in front of a speeding locomotive. Thetis, Shalimar, and Mezzanine, whose stylish flapper stenographer turnouts concealed bodies designed for the pleasure of intimates as well as the discomfort of strangers, were all crackerjack drivers, licensed gun owners, and sure-footed as burros at the Grand Canyon, knowing how to descend a stairway high-heeled into a hotel ballroom without tripping, though sometimes for fun the madcap Mezzanine liked to do just that, staging shrieking 30-foot descents just to draw the crowd reaction. Again, I can't even do justice to the prose because you stumble over little bits and pieces, but the prose itself is beautiful. And even when you get these characters, he gets these kind of these femme fatales, Thetis, Shalimar, and Mezzanine, and all the things they can do with the kind of physicality of them, descending into the Grand Canyon with as sure-footed as burros. There's so much beautiful specificity in Pynchon, and it's all narrative. I would like to read the narrative scene because he brings characters in and out of scenes and hilarious. They're often very slapstick and incredibly comic, and sometimes very emotional scenes. And he knows how to get them in and out of the scenes really quickly, and bring back characters we haven't seen before. So I still haven't quite finished the book, and I might do one last. This has become longer than I intended it to be. One last lecture on actually finishing the book, because I still got 35 pages to go, friends. I've been at this for quite a while, and I would like to say a few more words just about finishing the book and where we go next. Okay, thanks a lot. That's it.